Good evening, my friends, and Merry Christmas. It's good to see you all back to Most Haunted. And it's a Christmas Eve show, so we're going to have a little bit of fun today. You all, and I'm sure a lot of you in my age bracket there, the boomers, we grew up with Andy Griffith, Opie, Barney, Aunt B, the whole crew from Mayberry. That was Americana for us. And that was very much like, Bedford Falls, Jimmy Stewart's town in the Christmas movie. You know, we raised to think that that was what small town America was like. And to a degree it was, but it didn't show everything. And my guest today is Emily Morgan, and she is kind of runs the tours, the ghost tours of Mount Airy, North Carolina. Mount Airy is the town that Andy Griffith was a child in, and it was what he based Mayberry on. And so you're expecting, like a town of very happy people. Everyone's got a church to go to. Everyone takes care of each other. And the fun never ends, all that good stuff. But Mount Airy was, prior to the 1960s, known as Little Chicago. And this town has a very interesting history involving murder, stealing, just strange behavior. In fact, one of the things I found out about this town was prior to Mayberry, prior to the Andy Griffith Show, they had a real propensity to use dynamite to solve their problems around here. So with that kind of life, and again, every town has it. Every small town has the same things as the big city, except not as often, but it affects more people. So that kind of tragedy and trauma is going to bring ghosts. Now, I know, and you know, the Victorian era Christmases involve sitting around with a nice hot drink and telling ghost stories on Christmas Eve. Well, let me introduce you to Emily Morgan, and she's going to tell us some ghost stories about Mount Airy. I'm drinking tea, so Emily, you there with us?
Hi, Dan. It's nice to see you.
How you
Hi,
been?
everyone.
Emily is from the hills of Virginia, and your family gave you advice on how to deal with the Haints, the spirits, the ghosts, because you went to work in the museum and there's plenty of ghosts there. How's growing up in the Virginia hills?
Yeah, absolutely. So this past year, I've really gotten into my genealogy and all that kind of good stuff. And I found out that prior to thinking we'd maybe been here for 50 or so years, that my family has lived in the Virginia foothills and North Carolina area for up to 200 years. And so we were one of the first ships to come over, but we were like on the third or fourth. And so we have a really long history of living in the hills. And of course, with that comes all the superstitions and stories that came over from Scotland and Ireland and England and Germany. And so I had a very superstitious family growing up.
Right.
And that translated directly to my job, just like Dan said. I had some dealing with some haints or boogers or whatever you might want to call them. And I was given very specific advice on how to handle that.
And what did she say? Because you had a particular spirit who was rambunctious.
Yes. So something to note, and as a museum, we always say this before we talk about any kind of spirit, that at the museum, we are a repository of facts, and we are in no way endorsing you to believe in the supernatural. But if you didn't believe a little bit in the supernatural, would you be watching this podcast right now?
There you go.
And so with that being said, we have a fellow by the name of Mr. Merritt. He built our museum building sometime around the early 1900s, and he is believed to still be here. And every museum staff has a very specific story about Mr. Merritt. Now, mine is a little less, frightening than others, but I used to get so uneasy on our third floor. It's a
Mm-hmm.
wide open space. We have two 1924 Roadsters up there. And so there's just a lot of empty space, and it's really dark when you're going to turn the lights on and off at night. And I just knew that there was something going on.
Uh-huh.
Something's up there. I was not alone. And so my great-grandmother, her name was Louise, she was from Hillsville, Virginia, told me that if you enter a space to where you feel like you are not alone, whether it is a presence or an actual person, introduce yourself. Let them know you're there. So every morning when I would turn on the lights on the third floor, I would say, "Good morning, Mr. Merritt." I would greet him. That was common courtesy if it would have been a normal person or a real person. And so why not offer that to our dearly departed? And so I've done that since 2009. I will greet him in the morning. I greet him in the afternoon. And I honestly have never had any issues since.
Okay. So your grandmother told you the saying that I suggest: ghosts are the same in death as they are in life. You treat them with respect and dignity.
Yeah, if you treat everyone in your life alive and dead with respect, you likely won't have any problems.
And it's only people from the South who calls them boogers. Why is that?
I don't know. As a kid, we called them boogers. I have a small story from when I was a little girl living in Virginia. In the foothills going up to Galloway, I lived in a little house, and my mom used to say that I would talk to the man on the mountain. And he was specifically referred to as a booger, not as a positive entity. He did not always tell me the best of things. So I'm told, I don't remember any of these stories, but my mother said I would come in and say that I had been talking to this man that she could not see, and he would give me all kinds of advice that wasn't necessarily the best.
But you cannot remember what the advice.
My grandma always called them boogers or haints, and so it just kind of sticks.
All right. Well, let's get right into Mayberry. Where did the term Little Chicago come from?
So, I'm not 100% where the term started as far as calling Mayberry Little Chicago. Where I first learned it was from a book that I actually have with me, Murder in Mayberry. I hope you guys can read this. But Donna Smith, who wrote this book, was actually went to church with me when I was a little girl. And so I have been steeped in murder in Mayberry for a long time. And I first read it there. But we think that Mayberry kind of got the identifier because we had moonshiners. We had people running from the law. We had multiple murders, which we could talk about later if you wanted to. And so there were just a lot of unsavory things that come with living in the foothills. When you're further away from resources, you're further away from large cities, and you're really living and carving a life out of the mountain and the valley on your own. And so you don't really have to worry about the law. And as the railroad came to Mount Airy in 1888, and so as we're getting more things and more people coming in, the law decided to take a tighter grasp. And so these people who had been handling their business on their own for many years are now being told, hey, we have rules and that's not how it's going to fly. And so I think it was the clash of those two cultures in that very interesting time that caused us to get that name Little Chicago. They were just mountain people who lived by their own rules. And so when other people like the government and state decided to put some rules in place, they were like, it was a big clash.
Okay. And for some reason, I'm sure you understand why, there's a propensity for dynamite use in Mount Airy's history.
There really is. There are so many stories on Main Street alone that have to do with cars being blown up, buildings being blown up, roads being blown up. And, I want to think it probably had to do with the proximity to our granite quarry. We have the world's largest open-faced granite quarry in the world. It can be seen from space. And so for many years, and they would blast the granite. There is not a basement in Mount Airy that has not been blasted with some type of explosive just because it's so hard. And so it would have been easy to come by or easy to steal, likely. or purchased under the table like many of our businessmen did. And so I think proximity and, guns and bullets were used for other things at that time.
Yeah, they were hunters.
You're going to save that for your hunting, not necessarily trying to do something malicious. And even to that, even in history, they knew that some of that stuff could be traced back. And so they used some less desirable means to do their dirty work.
Well, on that topic, there's a story you told me about a shadow figure, and it's directly related to a car bombing.
Yes. And our dear friend Mark just rolled in. Do you want to bring a chair closer?
Come on up, Mark.
Is it okay if we skedaddle just a little bit real quick?
Of course. Of course.
Don't worry about it, Mark. Just make a mess.
Sorry.
No, it'll be good.
I picked the wrong chair. You just said pick a chair.
My little office here at the museum is a booby trap in itself.
Mark, she needs a bigger office, man.
He'll tell that to the van.
This is Mark Brown, and you actually did the research for the ghost stories that is told on the tour, right? And wrote it up?
Right. There were some cases where people started us with ghosts. There are some ghosts that are much more popular than others in town. Like, people would always say, are you going to do Turnmeyer's ghost? You got to have Turnmeyer's ghost on there. So we had a starting point. And then there are some others where you're doing the research, you're looking at the old newspapers and the old records of the day, and you go, hey, this guy was killed here, and that's probably who's in this building, and you can kind of piece it together that way too.
And without history, it's nothing but a campfire tale.
Yes.
You're right. And the museum does like it to be grounded in history, some sort of history. So even if you're still skeptical about ghosts, you still get the history of the area, and you go home going, I never knew we had an opera house downtown.
So, okay, go back to what you were saying about the shadow person.
He had just asked me about Shadow Man.
Oh, the Shadow Man.
Shadow Man is one of our ghosts that that is a very popular story off on Franklin Street, but it is based in a lot of history. December 31st, 1951, I believe.
I think that's right. We have this thing with ghosts and New Year's around here. I don't know what it is, but several of our stories involve New Year's Eve or New Year's Day. It just happened that way.
And so the Cockrams were getting ready for their day, and they were going out to their vehicle when I want to believe that it was Imogen, who was the wife, was getting ready to go to work. Yeah.
They both were.
They both were.
They both were, and apparently he was going to drive the pickup. He was a teacher, and he had to go check on the school was out on break apparently, and he had to go check on some stuff back at the classroom. Taught agriculture and that sort of thing, and got in his pickup truck and turned on the ignition and blew himself to kingdom come. And it really wasn't his doing. It kind of surprised everybody. But we don't want to go in depth about the whole story, I guess.
Well, we're giving our viewers a tease.
Just a tease.
Just a tease. And
yes, so you go.
When that happened, it created a ghost, or so we believe.
Yeah, so we think. A lot of ghost hunting is detective work. If this happened here and now this is happening in the same place, they're probably related. And then later on, you tie that together and you say, what else? You might bring a psychic or a medium out there and see what kind of impressions they get. And so we have done some of that, and there is some validity to that story there. There is a place where this occurred where the air is very heavy and you get eerie feelings.
Yeah, and the way that we tell the story, and I want to say that the way that Mark kind of got started on this story, he was doing some research and investigations on stories of the area, and he caught wind of a lady. I believe she was seeing her mother in a nursing home or a senior facility or something like that.
There's a lot of different ways. Yes. Yes. What, this particular one? A meeting of the Genealogical Association here.
There we go.
And what I tell people on our tours is, if you want to do ghost research, you find a geezer and you talk to the geezers. And usually in rural counties like ours, a lot of places where you find the geezers, and I'm not using this derogatorily, they will call themselves this, but they are the ones that know all the stories, whether true or not. That's usually a good starting place. Is,
Right.
well, you know, there was so-and-so that got murdered in that place, is the ghost that you're looking at. That's probably who it is. And that's a very valid way to get into doing the history of it.
Well, we got to be careful with that, because you and I are becoming the geezers now.
That's right. I am a full-fledged look at this white hair. I've been a geezer now for about 10 years, so I don't mind flipping the term around. But I was at this meeting talking to geezers, and a guy I knew had written a book about Tar Heel ghosts.
Okay.
And of course, none of his ghosts are on my tour. None of my ghosts are on his tour. You know, we try to leave each other's ghosts where they are. But I was interviewing him for the radio station, and this lady stepped right between us during the interview and said, I lived in a house in Mount Airy, and let me tell you, this is one of the most haunted places I've ever gone. And I just stopped. I left the recorder running, and I went, okay, let's hear your story.
Right.
And she started us down this path with this particular story.
Okay. It was that the Shadow Man?
The
Yes.
Shadow Man, exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
She had lived in that house and had some very interesting things happen. And it was her children who pinned him Shadow Man and had interactions with him to start off.
Yes.
Until she did and promptly left said house.
Yes. Yes. And in doing the research, I also discovered, and you probably know this too, that shadow man or shadow men or shadow beings exist in almost every culture.
Yes.
If you pull up a tribe from deepest, darkest South Africa, you pull up a tribe from deepest, darkest Wales, you pull up a tribe from Japan, they all have this kind of shadow man or dream person that's involved with their culture from way back. And that's when the hairs on the back of my neck started standing up. That was my first experience. I thought that was just a local thing. Apparently, it's tied into a whole worldwide belief system, I think.
Yes, very much. I've dealt with them myself in many places. So, all right. Okay. So we've got the black shadow person. And then what else do we have in Mount Airy that you have a good story that goes with?
Wow, we have, so on our tour, there's something like 20 plus stories.
More than we could ever tell in
And-
one night, yeah.
Yeah, and we keep learning more and more and more. But some of my favorites, with varying degrees of facts, is the Opera House, the R.R. Galloway Opera House. There is a little girl, or so ghost tour visitors and people of the street believe, who is trapped there waiting for her father to come to work, and he's never coming back.
Yeah.
He's never coming back.
Or maybe he is. Maybe they have some interaction that we don't see. Who knows?
Maybe they do. Maybe we need to do an investigation, Dan.
I know,
Well,
that,
tell
I, know
me
that I
when.
have a picture of her, but I don't have a picture of him, or something that looks like a little girl looking out that third window from the left. And so that's where the story came from, out of that particular one.
Now, this was a building that was built to be a store with a theater above it.
Yeah, it was a wholesale grocery in the bottom, or from what our limited knowledge on what it originally was used for, that's what it was used for, and then it had the opera house at the top. Now, I have been told, and this is how I tell the story, that this was an opera house. This was not the theater. This is where you could bring your family. This was a family-friendly place. Which by default, I'm assuming that the theater would have not necessarily always been a family-friendly place.
Well, you got the holdovers. I mean, you know, the area was settled with people that were immigrants from England and Scotland and places like that. And theater has never really had the best reputation in history past. I mean, Shakespeare's day, being an actor was just slightly, and I mean slightly, above being a garbage man, and in some cases even further below. And being an actor myself, I can tell you, it hadn't changed much over the years. But yes, this was an upscale kind of place. And they also used it for an auditorium. If the governor came here and was giving a speech, that's where it would be. If a big revival came through, that's where it would be. If the circus came to town and no place for them to put up the tents, that's literally where it would be. Now, they wouldn't have the elephants upstairs, but they would have all the acts you might have seen under a sideshow tent up there, the magician and the conjuring and all that.
Okay.
We have footage of that happening. I mean, we have pictures of that.
Yeah, we absolutely do. And like we were talking about earlier, Dan, this building is being built around that same time that the railroad comes to town, and that we're getting more involvement in state government, and things are a little changing for our mountain foothill people. And so Mr. Galloway was one of the
movers and shakers.
Movers and shakers is a very good way to say that, of Mount Airy, and helped to get the railroad here. And he lived just off Main Street. I guess then it would have been Main Street proper.
Yeah, easy walking distance. Today it's about 3 blocks away or so. But a pleasant walk into town to survey his holdings.
Yes, absolutely. And I tell people, little Miss Mary Kate, who the story is about, she passed long before this building was built. And so some people are like, well, why is she there? How does she have any connection to that place? And I like to think that spirits attach themselves to one of 3 things: people, places, or things. And she must have been attached to her father.
Right.
If we are to believe the story and how that goes, she must have been attached to her father and remained there in that space because that's where he spent a lot of his time.
Okay. Well, it makes perfect sense. Tell us about the ghosts within the museum.
Oh, Mark, do you want to tell your personal Merritt story?
Well, okay.
Let me twist your arm just a little bit.
Well, everybody that works in this museum or has any kind of more than passing association with it has had something strange happen here. And up until recently, we've operated on the principle that whoever is here, our permanent residents, as we call them, being politically correct, they're permanent residents. They must approve of what we're doing, and because I've never felt threatened. Only recently have we had a guide that actually felt threatened in the space, and she's one of our longest guides, and it had never happened to her before. So either we've got somebody new in here with us, or maybe she said something that they didn't like. It could be.
Yes.
We know that Mr. Merritt is still here, we think. The man that built the museum, actually it was built as a hardware store sometime around 1905. And at the time, this would have been the Walmart of its day. This was the largest hardware store in the middle of the county. It was at what was then the crossroads of the town. So this would have been the place for you not only to get your hardware, but your furniture, your clothing, your, I don't know what all. I mean, wagon parts. I mean, he sold it all. Bicycles.
At one time, you could come get your tags for your vehicle in the store. He was everything up and coming.
He was a heck of a resource. And Mr. Merritt himself was another mover and shaker in the town. At his wife's request, he wanted to build a brick house. And so there was nobody selling bricks. So he just opened a brickyard. That's the way you did it in 1900 whatever. And then he built this building out of bricks from his very own brickyard. And then he started Renfro Hosiery and several other things.
I did not know that.
Yes, he's one of those guys. Apparently he was a Swiss Army guy because, as soon as you told him you needed something, it was here and being sold. And Mr. Merritt did very well. And so being devoted to his businesses, he's still around, apparently. His office is here at the museum, and we have not changed it from the days when he was using that little room on the 3rd floor. His handwriting's still on the walls. He used to take notes because there's a telephone up there. And this is one of the first commercial buildings in Mount Airy to have a telephone. That's how important the store was to this community. And he would write the notes out longhand on the concrete wall beside of the telephone. So the notes are still up there. We call it Windows 1.0 is what that is there. That's what it is. But Mr. Merritt's office, you can go in that and things get moved around up there. And the thing that started me down this path with Mr. Merritt was one New Year's Eve, Mount Airy raises the sheriff's badge. We do that to set ourselves apart from any other city on the planet because we are Mayberry, and we get to do the Mayberry Sheriff's Badge raises up the side of the building to ring in the new year. I mean, New York can drop its apple, Charlotte can raise its crown. Well, we do the Sheriff's Badge because we're Mayberry. And it does tie in remotely to the museum. Why not?
Absolutely.
So
yeah, it's on the
I
roof.
have to go up and do that one year. Actually, the first year we did it was my idea, and they said, "Well, great, you go up and do it." And I am not a friend of heights. I do not enjoy being any higher off the ground than maybe 2 stories. And I had to go up on the roof of the museum and pull the star up the side of the building. So that's 3.5 stories off the ground, and was not enjoying that too much. And so when New Year's Eve arrived, the crowd is down there waiting. About 5 minutes till midnight, I get in the elevator and I ride to the dark 3rd floor by myself. And I feel like an astronaut getting ready to, going up in the rocket, getting ready to get on the rocket, And as I walk through the 3rd floor gallery area, I say to nobody in particular, "Mr. Merritt, this should be something. You want to come up on the roof and watch this with me?" And I didn't expect an answer, and I didn't get an answer. And then I got up on the roof, and to make a long story very short, I almost passed out because of the heights. I did get the star up the side of the building on time. And as I was laying there face down on the roof, trying not to hyperventilate, my dad rode the elevator up, came through the same 3rd floor gallery, and later told me he had the weirdest sensation that he was being followed. And he didn't know who it was or what it was. But when he got up on the roof, he saw a figure standing over me as I was laying face down on the roof with this big star dangling from the end of this pole it was on. And he came over and he said, "Who was that man?" And I said, "I have no idea what you're talking about because I'm still face down on the roof." And he said, "When I walked out of the hatch, there was a man standing over you looking down at you. Who was that? Because he's not up here now." And I said, "I have no idea who you're talking about." And he said, "I want to show you something." And after we pulled the star in, he showed me not 1, not 2, but 3 sets of footprints in the frost on that roof. One was mine, one was my dad's, and one was somebody else's.
Oh,
so
that's incredible.
It's highly ironic that the guy that runs the ghost tour and collects the stories and wants nothing more than to be haunted apparently gets a visit from the guy that owned the building in 1905, and I was too trying to not vomit to notice. So that's my ironical ghost story. I mean, he seems to approve of what I'm doing. It's drawing people to his store, if nothing else.
Right. And now you have a hardware store display in the bottom of the museum, or the main floor.
We do. That little section, from what I've been told, it was already built out. That was this place where you would go get your tags. It had to have a separate door that would close. And so now we do have that hardware store or general store there. That was out of Westfield, which is really close to Pilot Mountain, your home base stand. And they just kind of picked up everything, brought it to the museum, plopped it down.
That's what I love about working here. You're always getting to do something really interesting like that.
Right.
Let's just find a cabin and bring it in.
Sounds great.
How do we do that? Let's just find some Model Ts and put them on the 3rd floor. How do we do
Which
that?
looks
Will they fit
awesome,
in the elevator? No, they're going to have to be swung in from the 3rd floor window. Always exciting working at a museum.
Well, those old cars up there are awesome with the headlights and all of that. Just incredible.
It adds to it too.
Emily, you was telling me about a experience you had during a ghost hunt recently in the building.
Oh, yes. We always have paranormal investigators who are interested in coming through the museum, and we are usually very obliging to that.
Oh yeah, you're welcome to, if you're watching this and you're paranormal, get in touch with her and she'll tell you.
Call me. We'd love to have you. And so this was January, pre-pandemic, and we were split up into 2 different groups, and Kate, who is one of our ghost tour guides, was on the 3rd floor, and I started in the basement, and we finally worked our way together, and we made it up to the 3rd floor where Mr. Merritt's office is. And all night, somebody is trying to get a reading from Mr. Merritt. Nobody can get it. He is like, haha, joke's on you. I only venture out during the day. And so everyone was just desperate to get something. Everyone had their own equipment. They had brought enough to share. And up there where we now have our program space, they had strobe lights and flashlights and cameras and all kinds of things. And as a last resort, we decided that we would each take a turn going in Mr. Merritt's office and just trying to get something. And so we were all kind of gathered, and we each took our turn, and no one was getting anything. Every once in a while, the EMF readers would jump, or the temperature would just slightly go down. And then when Kate and I, it was about our turn and we were just about to be done. It was somewhere close to like 2:40 in the morning. We were tired. We were done. And we went to go through. And Kate, she went through and got a little bit. And we had been chatting before. And so whenever I went through, nothing happened at the first. I stepped over the threshold. Nothing happened. But as I was turning back to Kate to just say something, it spiked. My EMF reader spiked.
Okay.
And she said, Emily, do your thing. As I told you, Dan, every morning and afternoon, I say, good morning, Mr. Merritt.
Right.
Good afternoon, Mr. Merritt, as a way to ease myself and to tell Mr. Merritt that I'm there just to turn on the lights so people can come visit him. I said, good morning, Mr. Merritt. And my EMF reader went off. It went crazy. And the more I talked, and I have a very distinct voice, as Dan said, the more I talked, the more it went off. And they were just so thrilled. But as soon as I left his office, it was done. And no one else could go back in and get a reading at all. But I like to think that he was like, Emily, you want to know that I'm here. You've been doing this thing since 2009. Here's you a little scrap of something. I hope you enjoy it.
Or,
you know,
there was somebody there he knew.
Yeah.
Somebody he's comfortable with is the way we like to look at it.
I have been kind to him. He reciprocated and was kind to me.
All right. Okay, so we got the building, and then we go out, and there is a story of a woman. And I know you got a lot more stories from the building, but we'll share that during the tours. But there's a woman out there crying. That's right outside, right?
The Wailing, that's at the foot of the hill. That's about half a block away. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that is the Wailing Woman of Market Street. And there have been several different stories that people have shared with us about a woman or Market Street in general. And I always tell people on our tours that each story has a kernel of truth. Right. Whoever you're hearing it from has their own spin. They've added a detail that maybe they don't really realize that they've added. Maybe their mom told them this way or something like that, and it has changed every time. And so everyone has their own different story about the Wailing Woman of Market Street. Was she even a woman?
Well, that's true.
Was it a man who just, when he cried, sounded like a woman?
It's an indistinct form is what we've been told. And you're right. And I also myself am a journalist and a news reporter and everything too. Right. And so what we tell people when they press us, on certain stories is this is not journalism. I take you completely at your word. You had an experience on Market Street. That's where it stops. You had that experience. I wasn't there with you. I have to trust what you're telling me. And so we repeat those stories. Now, we can tell you, have I run into her? I have not. I have tried my darndest. I think I like to explain it as around here, permanent residents seem to act like cats. If you're allergic to cats and you go over to somebody's house and they have a cat, where does the cat sit? On your lap. It always does. And I think spirits are in that way a lot like that. Somebody that wants to see them might be the very last person that ever gets haunted. Although we have had people that have come very close.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, each story is different about the Wailing Woman. But I love one that Kate tells, I said to one of our guides, about a young cop who was doing his rounds, and he was trying to find this woman who was in distress. When I tell the Wailing Woman of Market Street, I do a series of women in distress. I do 3 women in distress. Yes. Okay. And so, and he was trying to really locate this woman. He had radioed in to dispatch and let them know that he was going to investigate. He wanted to make sure she was okay. Now, Market Street today is not Market Street even 5 years ago. And so it was a very vacant place, lots of creepy alleyways.
Oh, yeah. When we started this tour, Mount Airy had no downtown nightlife at all. And so Market Street was the scariest place I could walk you down. One street light and an entire block was working. The buildings were vacant and abandoned, and they just stare at you like the empty eyes of skulls as you walk by them. You could imagine anything going on down there. And of course, since we've started doing this, they've come in and they've renovated it. They've streetscaped it. And now it's so full of life and fun and frivolity. It's just awful if you're a spirit, because that wouldn't be where you choose to haunt, I don't think, at all. And so it changed the whole atmosphere of the street. Now you look at it, you go, oh, sure, there are spirits here. Sure. Those guys are drinking over there, and having a party.
Yeah. So the street that this young cop is going down is not the street that is there today. It's vacant.
Gotcha.
There's nothing going on. And he hears a woman crying. I mean, she is in distress. It's not just a couple tears, obviously. It's somebody actually, it's some waterworks. And so he investigates. He gets out of his car. He can never find her. He hears her crying, and he just rides Market Street over and over and over. He eventually radios back to dispatch that he cannot find her, and that he has just exasperated all of his resources that he had at the time. And dispatch radios back. Nobody ever does.
Okay.
This is not just a story that's told by grandparents. This is a story that if your police dispatch knows that there's a ghost that you're likely going to hear, but you're not going to find, that, that's going to be being told a lot for it to make it that far.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And for them to have the confidence to say to a police officer who, depending on the type of police officer you are, you can be by the book or you can be fun. And so, but usually by the book, Dan, I know Dan was a police chief. And she's like, very seriously, no one ever does. And so I think that's pretty cool. And being foothills mountain people from Scotland and Ireland, we like to add a lot of flair on things. And so
I love it.
If you were to come to one of our ghost tours, every person you're going to go with has a different flair.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I don't tell stories the same that Mark does, but I haven't been told the stories the same. And having a superstitious background, it's going to come different from each person.
Of course.
Yes.
Of course. And we do have a script that our guides study initially, but you're free to improvise around that, and you're free to go off that if you have your own experiences to add in there. And one of the things I used when I was starting this out is I'm a huge Disney fan. Grew up going to Disney World, love it, miss going there every year 3 or 4 times. One of the things I modeled this on is the Jungle Cruise. The Jungle Cruise has a script. If you get on the boat, you ride around with the skipper, there is a script they're supposed to stick to. But every skipper adds their own unique jokes. Every skipper hears jokes from somebody else and puts those into their thing. And it's the entertainment value is provided by that person. You can't ever record this on a spiel and just have it automatically trip as they're going through, because you have to have somebody performing this thing to you. And so we built ours on the same model. And you can take that tour that they have 20 different times and get 5 different guides and have 20 different experiences, and you can do that here too. The guide gets to choose what stories of ours they tell, or even if they have their own, they get to put their own take on it. And so it's designed for repeat viewing, because every experience is going to be completely different. Okay.
And Mark, just so the folks know, aside from this, you drive a 1963
Oh yeah, the squad cars.
Squad car tour.
Ordinarily a 64, but yes, we do the Mayberry squad car tours here as well, and that's the same type of thing. It's a tour that's rooted in history, but can be done 1,000 different ways, and encourages repeat performances. Really, repeat viewing. The same kind of thing. Now, you won't hear the same stories that you will on the ghost tour that you hear on the squad car tour, but they tie together. For instance, Mount Airy is also known as the Granite City. And one reason we call ourselves that, not only do we have the world's largest open-faced granite quarry, which you will see in the squad car tour, but you go down Main Street, which itself is built on a ridge of granite that runs right down the middle of the street. And a lot of the buildings in the town don't have full basements. They can't. And some of them, like the one we are sitting in right here, do not have foundations. It's built right on top of solid granite. There's no real reason to have a foundation. And people have said before that granite has its own unique piezoelectric properties that may or may not be handy in attracting people and guests from other regions. And so that is something we go with. It's got
other regions or
properties.
the Twilight Zone.
Yes.
Yeah.
Could be.
All right, Emily, you told me a story which I had not heard on the tour, but it was really cool about a firefighter coming into the museum.
Yes. So again, I keep reiterating Kate. Dan, when you meet Kate, you're gonna love her. She is a historian by trade, and that's what she loves. That's her bread and butter. That's what she wants to do all the time.
And her background is she was a tour guide at Gettysburg. I mean, she's one of the tour guides.
And so she has a lot of experience with spirits and really listening and offering herself up to people who have a story to tell. And so I want to say it's probably been about 4 years ago now that the Liberty Warehouse burned, 4 or 5.
Yeah, 5 years anyway. Yeah.
But so when we had a tobacco warehouse off of Main Street proper,
maybe 2 blocks from here.
Yeah, about
not even 2, really. Across the street and down.
Just down the street here.
On the other side of the Granite Ridge.
Yes, that caught on fire. And so we have our volunteer fires and the firefighters and the Mount Airy fire department coming in to fight. But we also had volunteer fire groups from out of town come and work the fire. And of course, when they come, we always offer them a chance to come see our fire exhibit here at the museum because we love it. We have 3 fire engines in our basement.
The original 3.
Yeah, the original 3 in our basement. So it's really cool. And we, say, come to the museum. You can get in for free. Thanks for helping our downtown. We want you to check this stuff out. And
okay,
so
let me interrupt because those fire engines you have are from the 1920s.
There's
earlier.
1917, 1946,
and 1926.
1926.
And they are incredible. They are in beautiful, beautiful condition. Firefighters should want to come just to see that.
Okay. Yeah, and Mark, being the theater product manager behind the scenes guy, he is rigging up is it the 46?
We're going to start with the 46 La France, where they're all going to do it. But we want them to sing and dance. We don't want them to just sit there like the Model Ts upstairs. We want their lights to work and their sirens to blow and their horns to. And we're going to do this. You need the full experience. If you're standing in front of a fire truck, you can look at it all day long. But if you can push a button and blow its siren or push a button and ring its bell, all the better.
Well, let's just think about that because you're going to have 4 kids down there, each fighting to hit each horn at the same time.
Which is what we want.
That's okay. Right. That is actively learning history. And, we're on not to get off on a tangent, but we're in a renovation phase that could last, 3 or more years. But we want everything to be interactive. We want you to be immersed in history. You're going back in time. You can actually crank the Model T. You can actually listen to a story in our cabin about life on the frontier. And so that's our big thing is, now we want you to be able to live it. And so hopefully, if you come, some of those things we'll be working on those. And if you got advice, drop it to us.
Yeah. Which is another reason we bring the fire people in. If they're looking at this, there's more stories. Somebody from the museum goes with them and you might get a few more stories.
Sure.
Which is all about what we're doing. We're just telling stories of the region. So if somebody comes in from somewhere relatively close, that's a regional story. We might can use that.
Yeah, absolutely. And on this particular day that the fella came down after working the fire at the Liberty Warehouse, he was telling Kate that he believes with everything that is in him that he encountered a spirit in the fire while the building was burning. Him and his 2 partners were going through checking for hot spots and making sure that everything was cool and stable. And they were getting ready to go under a large beam when he heard in his headset the call to stop. He stopped. His counterparts did not hear the same thing. They ran into his back. But by stopping, he saved all of them. The beam fell directly in front of him. He would have made it through, but his partner behind him would have been taken out underneath that beam. And when they finally got out and everybody, regained their cool, he said, "Why did you guys not stop? Why did you not stop?
Didn't you hear that?
Didn't you hear the call to stop?" And they said, "No, we didn't hear anything." He is convinced that a spirit told him to stop. An overwhelming feeling that it was a not of this world call to save his life.
Well, to add to that, half a block up the hill is a fire department display you have that is haunted by a former chief. Was it fire chief?
And maybe more, at least the former chief.
And so, that whole block right there, maybe some entity from our building or another saw that fire and was like, hey, I've got to go do my job.
Yeah.
And
that's awesome.
He helped his fellow brethren doing the job, and, he saved a life. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of spirits, I personally believe, have a job left to do, or they want to make themselves useful, or continue to do their job like Mr. Merritt. And so he was just doing his duties as he thought was appropriate.
Okay. Let's step away from the ghost, because you have as much history as you have ghost stories on this tour.
Oh,
and
absolutely. You
were telling me there was a place on, I think it was Market Street, and the folks had the lady in the back of the hearse, ambulance, whatever. And they named that place after that incident.
It is. So the old Moody's Funeral Home used to be on Market Street. The big, I want to say carports, but I don't know. There's a proper name for where they parked the hearse.
Yeah, the garage.
The garage.
The garage where they park the hearses, yeah.
I couldn't remember the word for garage.
It's French.
That's okay. Put my college degree to work here. And so these gentlemen were having a lovely time at a community picnic, and a call came out that a lady had passed away, or so the story goes, had passed away, and that they were on duty. They had to go pick her up. And so they fought about who was going to go, because they didn't want to leave their lady folks at the community picnic alone where other men might be tempted. And so they decided they were going to do it really quick, and then they were going to get back to the picnic. They went to pick her up, parked her in the garage, and went back to the picnic. Fast forward a few hours, a lady was walking on Market Street in the morning, or that's how the story's been told to me, and they hear someone knocking on the garage doors, beating. And she calls the authorities. That poor woman had spent the night not only in the funeral home, but in a locked hearse. They've let her out. I don't know if those boys got in trouble, but I imagine they did.
They probably did.
I would say so.
And so we have a restaurant and bar down there called
Thirsty Souls.
Thirsty Souls. My brain was going to be gone.
Which I love. I mean, they just had to name it Thirsty Souls. Which great.
That's what got my attention. So,
and that's not our only restaurant downtown that has benefited from having a ghostly presence. The Old North State Winery, that's directly across from the museum, is considered one of the most haunted buildings in downtown. And they have a red wine, I believe, that is called Restless Spirit. Restless Soul. I'm thinking Spirit because the other. Restless Soul, and you can read the full story on the back. And it's a pretty interesting story.
That's one of the stories on our tour too. We originally, when we started doing the ghost tour, we were in partnership with the museum with the winery. They're right across the street from each other, and it was good for everybody. It was so good that their bookings increased, and they didn't kick us out, but we kind of separated, and we still maintain good relationships. Some of the tours still do go down.
Okay, I lost the voice. Okay, try again. Lost you. All right. Okay, I think we lost him over there, but folks, to add to that, the wine they were referring to comes in a dark bottle with a black label, and it's got a skeleton hand holding a wine glass. And I know the story, some of it. The story was they found that hand in the rubble after someone tried to blow up the building, right?
Yes, they did. Sorry, we dropped out.
Oh, that's fine.
Yes,
Hand and arm. Actually, the from the elbow up is what we were told.
Right.
and that's it.
And no one knows where it come from because nobody was killed in that explosion.
And the better part is nobody knows where it went. The police did not retain said arm. It is in somebody's Meemaw's basement.
I have tried to find it because I would love on my tours just to whip that out going, here it is right here.
Right.
Can't find it. It was here. It's not here.
But now the place is very, very haunted. So.
Yes, absolutely. If you're ever in Mount Airy, go get your drink and see if you encounter any spirits.
They'll let you down if they're not having some sort of event in the barrel room or cask room or whatever you want to call it. They'll let you go down there and look. I mean, it's just big barrels of wine. It looks very Pirates of the Caribbean-ish down there.
It does.
Because my Disney history. But and some people do actually get vibes down there. The air is heavier there, and it is. Okay. It does stay cold year round. That's a good place to put the wine.
Okay, folks. In the last couple of minutes I've got, tell me about getting to the museum, getting to the tours, and how folks can get a hold of you.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do our tours May through November, and they're on Friday and Saturday nights at 8:00. It's $20 per person to take the tour, but that's an hour and a half walking tour. You're going to get to see the town. You're going to get to learn some history. And so those will start back up in May. But during the winter hours, we will be having ghost socials and behind the scenes tours of inside the museum because it's just a little too cold to walk around outside. And our first one of those is January 6th. If you're in the area, you can check out our Facebook or our website to learn more about the other dates and the other things that we've got going on. Or you can just call the museum and chat with Emily or really anybody here on the staff will be able to give you all the information you could ever want. All
right. And can you give us that phone number so folks can put it down? This is neat. They could always replay the show and get the number. So,
yeah, it would be 336-786-4478.
Okay.
And I'm extension 229 if you want to talk to me directly. But like I said, anyone can help you out.
All right. Well, Emily and Mark, thank you so much for coming on. It was a good Christmas Eve ghost story for us.
Absolutely. Happy holidays, everyone. Thanks, Dan.
Yes,
thank you, folks.
You for having us.
And just to let everyone know, I'm going to be working with them very shortly. They've asked, we're going to be working together. I will be helping them out with some of the ghost stuff. So come on down. You can see us, see me. We're gonna have a blast. Well, folks, that's about it for this time. Christmas is right here. It's tomorrow. So I want to ask you all to have a very, very Merry Christmas. And our next guest, by the way, will be Tom Ferrario. That's on New Year's Eve. And if you've heard of the Marley Woods, it's very much like, Skinwalker Ranch, except it's worse. And there is not only aliens, but paranormal activity, and that's what we're going to be talking about. So stay close to us. Once again, thank you very much. Merry Christmas.